I opened her door to tears, distance shrinking to silence. Her question hovered like a letter unsent, step closer or leave, my heartbeat answering before my voice did, and breath. Don't forget to like, comments and subscribe our channel Whispers of Love. Please press the bell icon for notification of daily upload videos. Thanks. I had worked for her for 2 years. 2 years of watching her walk through the office like nothing could touch her, heels steady, spine straight, eyes sharp enough to cut through excuses. I never crossed a line. Never let my thoughts wander where they weren't allowed to go. She was my boss. Full stop. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. She was a single mother in a corporate war zone, raising a 7-year-old son while running a company that devoured weak men for breakfast. Board members respected her. Competitors feared her. Employees whispered her name like a warning and a promise. No one truly knew her, not the way people think they know powerful women. Except maybe me. I saw the cracks most people missed. The way she arrived early and left late, as if home was quieter but heavier. The way she held her phone just a second too long before answering calls from her son's school. The way her shoulders sagged for half a heartbeat when the office lights dimmed and she thought no one was watching. I stayed late most nights. Not because she asked me to, she never did, but because something in me refused to leave before she did. I told myself it was professionalism. Dedication. Loyalty. Lies are easy when you repeat them often enough. I learned the small things. She liked her coffee black but warm, never hot. She rubbed her temples when stress crept behind her eyes, as if pressing hard enough could keep the world from collapsing inward. Her smile, so polished in meetings, faded the moment she turned away, like a mask slipping off backstage. That night felt different from the start. The office was quiet in a way that pressed against my ears. Outside, the city glowed faintly through the glass walls, distant lights blurred like unfinished thoughts. I shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and headed toward the elevator, until I heard it. A sound I had never heard from her before. Soft. Broken. Human. It came from her office. I stopped walking. For a moment, I told myself to leave. That this was none of my business. That whatever was happening behind that glass door was her burden, not mine. But my feet didn't listen. They turned on their own. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, softer this time. Come in, she whispered. That voice, hoarse, trembling, undid something in me. She was sitting on the floor beside her desk. Shoes kicked off carelessly. Hair falling loose from its perfect knot. Makeup smudged, like she had tried and failed to hold herself together. Her hands were shaking, fingers clenched as if she was bracing for an earthquake only she could feel. This wasn't Miss Carter. This was a woman collapsing under invisible weight. I'm sorry, I said instinctively, already stepping back. I didn't mean to. No, she interrupted quietly. Stay. I hesitated, the glass walls suddenly feeling too transparent, too exposed. Distance felt safer. Necessary. But she looked up at me then, and the fear in her eyes stripped every rule I had ever followed down to nothing. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I didn't plan to kneel in front of her. My body just did it. Like gravity had changed direction. Do what? I asked gently. She let out a laugh that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. Be strong, she said. Be perfect. Be everything for everyone. Her voice cracked. Be alone. The word echoed in the room, bouncing off glass and steel until it settled somewhere deep in my chest. Silence swallowed us. Not the awkward kind. The heavy kind. The kind that presses down on your ribs and dares you to breathe anyway. I noticed a framed photo on her desk, her and her son at a park, mid-laugh, sunlight frozen behind them. A painting on the wall I had never paid attention to before, a woman standing behind glass, hand pressed flat against it, eyes looking out instead of in. I wondered how long it had been there. I wondered if it was hers. She followed my gaze and exhaled slowly. I bought that painting after my divorce, she said. I thought it would remind me to stay strong. A pause. Turns out, it just reminds me how trapped I feel. She looked back at me then. Straight into my eyes. I need you, she said softly. My heart stopped. Not in the dramatic way people write about, more like it skipped a beat, forgot its rhythm, then came crashing back too loud. Too fast. Not as my employee, she added quickly, as if afraid of what the words sounded like. I know how this looks. I know how wrong it could be. Her hands tightened in her lap. But I need someone I can trust. Someone who doesn't see me as a title. The distance between us felt suddenly enormous and impossibly small at the same time. I should have stood up. I should have reminded her of boundaries, of professionalism, of consequences. I should have said no. Instead, I said her name. Just once. Quietly. She flinched, then relaxed, like hearing it out loud gave her permission to be human again. Outside, the city hummed on, unaware of the moment unfolding behind the glass. Inside, something fragile balanced on the edge of breaking, or becoming something else entirely. I don't want anything from you, she said, almost pleading. I just don't want to be invisible tonight. I nodded slowly. You're not. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. I didn't touch her. Didn't reach out. Intimacy doesn't always need contact, sometimes it lives in restraint, in choosing not to cross a line even when every part of you wants to. But as I sat there with her, knees aching against the floor, watching her breathe through the weight of her life, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a breakdown. This was a confession waiting to explode. And I had just stepped close enough to feel the heat of it, without knowing whether I would survive the blast, or be changed by it forever. Behind that glass, she stopped being just my boss. And I realized, with a quiet certainty that scared me more than any risk ever had. I would never see her the same way again. I didn't leave that night the way I usually did. Normally, I shut down my computer, nodded to the security guard, and stepped back into a life that felt paused until the next morning. But after sitting on that office floor with her, after hearing the cracks in a woman everyone believed was unbreakable, walking away felt like abandoning something unfinished. She stood first, slowly, steadying herself against the desk. The boss mask slid back into place with practiced ease, but it didn't fit the same anymore. I had seen what lived underneath. Thank you, she said, clearing her throat. For not asking questions. I nodded. Anytime. Those words followed me home like a shadow. Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her the way she looked before she noticed me, small, shaking, human. I wondered how many nights she'd fallen apart alone before I ever knocked on that door. I wondered why the thought hurt so much. The next morning, she was already in the office when I arrived. Perfectly composed. Hair neat. Voice calm. If I hadn't been there the night before, I would have believed the illusion like everyone else. But I had been there. And she knew it. Our eyes met briefly across the conference room. Just a second. Just enough. Something unspoken passed between us, an understanding, fragile and dangerous. Later that afternoon, her phone rang. I noticed because she froze. Not for long. Just a heartbeat. But it was enough. She stepped out of her office to take the call, her back to the glass. I saw her shoulders tense, her free hand curling into a fist. When she returned, the color had drained from her face. Cancel my last meeting, she said quietly. Anne, close the door, please. I did. The room felt smaller than before. He called, she said, sitting down slowly. My ex. The word carried more weight than her title ever had. I stayed silent, letting her decide how much to give me. She stared at the painting on the wall, the woman behind the glass, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't say anything else. He thinks I'm doing too well, she continued. Too calm. Too stable. A bitter smile tugged at her lips. Men like him hate that. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. He wants to revisit custody, she said. Not because he misses our son. Because he wants control. Her voice didn't shake this time. But her hands did. I noticed a folded envelope on her desk, edges worn soft like it had been opened too many times. My eyes lingered there before I could stop myself. She followed my gaze. A letter, she said. From years ago. I write things I'm not allowed to say out loud. She didn't offer it to me. And I didn't ask. Some distances exist for a reason. I'm tired, she admitted. Of fighting ghosts. Of proving I deserve the life I built. I leaned back slightly, giving her space. Distance can be a kindness too. You don't have to prove anything, I said. She laughed quietly. That's easy to say when your past doesn't keep knocking. There it was. The past. Not a memory, but a presence. She stood and walked to the window, arms folded around herself. The city reflected faintly in the glass, layering her face with lights that didn't belong to her. For a moment, she looked like two versions of the same woman, one strong, one exhausted, trapped in the same body. I promised myself I wouldn't lean on anyone again, she said. Especially not you. Why? I asked. She turned, meeting my eyes. Because you see me. And that's dangerous. The honesty of it stole my breath. I don't want to cross lines, she continued. I don't want rumors. Or complications. Or mistakes. There was a pause. But I don't want to be alone in this. That sentence settled between us, heavy and fragile. I thought of the photo of her son. Of the letter on her desk. Of the woman in the painting, hand pressed against glass, watching life from the wrong side. You don't have to be, I said carefully. I'm not going anywhere. She studied my face, searching for something, maybe weakness, maybe intention. When she found neither, her shoulders finally dropped. Just, stay professional, she said softly. I nodded. Of course. But even as I said it, I knew something had shifted. Because professionalism doesn't linger in shared silence. It doesn't live in the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. It doesn't ache like this. That evening, as I packed up to leave, I noticed the envelope was gone. In its place sat the painting, turned slightly, angled toward the door. As if she wanted someone to see it. As if she wanted me to. I paused, hand on the handle, wondering how many unspoken truths were sealed inside letters never meant to be read, and how close I was to becoming one of them. Behind me, her voice stopped me. Tomorrow, she said quietly, things might get harder. I turned back. And if they do? I asked. She held my gaze, steady and afraid all at once. Promise you won't disappear. I didn't answer right away. Some promises, once spoken, change everything. And standing there, between glass and silence, I realized the past hadn't just knocked on her door. It had found me too. The next day arrived too quietly. No crisis. No confrontation. No dramatic fallout, just the hum of computers, the polite rhythm of meetings, the illusion that nothing had shifted. But I felt it in my bones. Some questions don't need to be spoken to exist, they linger in the air, pressing against every breath. She avoided me all morning. Not obviously. Not in a way anyone else would notice. She spoke when necessary, delegated with precision, moved through the office like the woman everyone expected her to be. But the silences between us stretched thin, pulled tight by something unacknowledged. At noon, I found a note on my desk. Please come by after hours. No signature. She didn't need one. All afternoon, the clock betrayed me. Minutes dragged, then vanished. I answered emails I didn't remember sending, nodded through conversations I barely heard. Every time I glanced at the glass walls of her office, I caught my reflection instead, waiting, hesitant, already too involved. By the time the office emptied, the city had shifted into evening. Lights flickered on. Conversations faded. The world narrowed to a single hallway and a closed door. I knocked once. Come in, she said. She stood near the window this time, not on the floor. Composed again, but not armored. Her jacket hung neatly on the back of her chair. Sleeves rolled up. Hair loose. The painting remained angled toward the door, as if it had been waiting. I didn't want to make this a habit, she said without turning. Late night talks. I closed the door gently. Then why ask me to stay? She took a breath. Let it out slowly. Because habits form whether we want them to or not. She faced me then, eyes searching, guarded. I thought about yesterday all night, she said. About what I said. About what I didn't. I stayed where I was, leaving space between us. Distance felt safer, for both of us. So did I admitted. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she'd already feared. My ex filed paperwork this morning, she continued. Nothing official yet. Just a reminder that peace is temporary. Her mouth tightened. He knows how to time his chaos. I felt anger rise, hot and useless. What do you want to do? She studied me carefully. That's the problem. I don't know what I'm allowed to want. She walked to her desk and opened a drawer, pulling out the envelope I'd noticed before. The edges were more worn now, as if she'd been carrying it with her. I wrote this years ago, she said, holding it like it might fall apart. On a night very much like the one you saw. She paused. It's addressed to someone who never existed. She placed it on the desk between us. I don't want you to read it, she said quickly. I just want you to know it's there. I nodded. Emotional symbols don't need explanations, they ask for understanding, not answers. She leaned back against the desk, arms crossed, not defensive, just bracing. I'm good at surviving, she said. At building walls that look like success. But I don't know how to ask for help without feeling like I'm failing. You're not failing, I said. She smiled faintly. That's easy to say when you're not the one being watched. Her eyes flicked to the glass walls. To the world outside them. Everything I do is observed, she continued. Every choice analyzed. If I stumble, it won't just be my career. It'll be my son. Her voice softened on the word. I can't afford mistakes. I stepped closer, just one pace. Not enough to cross a line. Enough to be present. Then don't make them alone, I said. Her breath caught. Just slightly. That's what scares me, she whispered. Because when you say things like that, she trailed off, shaking her head. It feels like leaning. And I promised myself I wouldn't lean again. Silence stretched between us, alive with everything we weren't saying. She picked up the envelope again, turning it over in her hands. In this letter, she said quietly, I asked a question I never had the courage to ask anyone. I felt my pulse quicken. What question? I asked. She met my gaze, steady and trembling all at once. Whether it's possible to be strong and still need someone. The words landed hard. I never mailed it, she said. Because I didn't want the answer. She placed the envelope back in the drawer and closed it carefully, as if sealing the past inside. Then she looked at me. And now, she said, I find myself wanting to ask that question out loud. The room seemed to hold its breath. I shouldn't, she added quickly. This isn't appropriate. This isn't safe. I didn't move. Didn't interrupt. Some moments demand patience. But pretending I don't feel this pressure, she continued, touching her chest lightly, is becoming unbearable. I swallowed. What are you asking? She hesitated. Just long enough to make the question dangerous. Stay, she said. The word was simple. Heavy. Undefined. Stay, how? I asked carefully. Her eyes flicked away, then back. Tonight, she said. Just tonight. Not as my employee. Not as a solution. Her voice dropped. As someone who doesn't disappear when things get complicated. I felt the weight of that ask settle on me, on everything it could become. I thought of the office. The rumors. The risks. The future we hadn't discussed and the past that kept reaching forward. And then I thought of the woman behind the glass. Of the painting. Of the letter that never left a drawer. I can stay, I said slowly. But we define the boundaries. Together. Relief crossed her face, followed by something like fear. Boundaries, she repeated. Yes. We stood there, neither of us moving closer, the space between us charged but intact. Outside, the city lights blinked on fully, reflections layering over the glass, two figures superimposed on 1,000 lives that had nothing to do with ours. She exhaled. I don't know where this leads. Neither do I said. She nodded. That might be the most honest thing you've said. I glanced once more at the painting, then back at her. Whatever happens, I added, we don't pretend this conversation didn't happen. She held my gaze. Agreed. A quiet understanding settled between us, not comfort, not certainty, but intention. As I took a seat across from her desk, keeping the space we'd agreed on, she turned off the overhead light, leaving only the glow of the city and a small lamp behind her. Half shadow. Half light. Somewhere between distance and intimacy. And as the night stretched on, I realized the real question wasn't whether it was possible to be strong and still need someone. It was whether either of us was brave enough to find out what the answer would cost. That night didn't end the way nights usually do. There was no dramatic confession. No reckless crossing of lines. No moment that could be easily labeled or undone. Instead, there was time, slow, careful, terrifying time, stretching between us like a thin wire we both agreed not to snap. We worked. Side by side, but not together. She reviewed documents at her desk while I sat across from her, organizing reports that no longer mattered as much as the quiet agreement humming beneath the surface. The lamp behind her cast a soft halo, leaving half her face in shadow. It felt symbolic, like I was only allowed to see part of her, the rest guarded by choice. Every so often, our eyes met. And each time, we looked away first. Intimacy doesn't always announce itself with touch. Sometimes it arrives as restraint, as discipline, as the ache of what could happen if you leaned just 1 inch closer. At some point, she stood and poured 2 glasses of water. She slid one toward me across the desk, our fingers didn't touch, but the space between them buzzed like it had. Thank you, I said. She nodded. For staying. The word staying had already begun to change its meaning. Around midnight, she checked her phone. Her expression softened instantly, the tension melting into something warmer, more fragile. My son, she said quietly. He can't sleep unless I text him goodnight, even if he's already asleep. She typed slowly, carefully, like each word mattered more than the last. I watched her face as she read the reply, a simple heart emoji, probably, but it hit her like oxygen. That's who I do this for, she said, more to herself than to me. I glanced at the photo on her desk again. Mother and son. A moment frozen in sunlight. It struck me how much of her life was built around protecting that single frame from shattering. "You're doing enough," I said. She looked at me then, really looked at me. "If I were," she replied softly, "I wouldn't feel this tired." Something in her voice broke the careful distance we'd been maintaining. She moved to the window, arms wrapping around herself, staring out at the city. The glass reflected her image faintly, layering her face over lights that didn't belong to her. Once again, the woman behind the glass. "I hate that I need help," she admitted. "I hate that the strongest version of me is still exhausted." "You don't need help," I said, choosing my words carefully. "You need support. There's a difference." She let out a breath that sounded like relief. "That's a dangerous distinction," she said. "Because support implies staying." I didn't answer right away. Distance matters when the wrong answer can ruin everything. Instead, I stood and joined her at the window, still leaving space, still respecting the line. Our reflections hovered side by side but didn't overlap. "I don't know what staying looks like," I said. "But I know what disappearing costs." She turned her head slightly, enough to see me without fully facing me. "That's what scares me," she said. "That you'll become something I rely on." "And if I do?" I asked. She swallowed. "Then losing you would hurt more than losing control." The honesty of it left no room to hide. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something folded, creased, familiar. "The letter. I almost gave this to you tonight," she said. "Not to read. Just to hold. As proof that I'm not imagining this weight." She didn't hand it to me. Instead, she unfolded it slowly, smoothed it against the glass, then folded it again. "I won't," she decided. "Not yet." That restraint felt heavier than any confession. Hours passed in fragments, quiet conversations, shared silences, work that became an excuse to remain in the same room. At some point, exhaustion claimed her first. She sank into the chair, head tilted back, eyes closed. "You can go," she murmured. "I'm okay." I knew that tone. The one people use when they don't want to be alone but don't know how to ask for more. "I'll finish these and then leave," I said. She nodded, trusting me with something fragile again. As I worked, I studied her, really studied her. The lines of fatigue near her eyes. The tension she carried even in rest. The strength that had been mistaken for invincibility by everyone except the people who stayed long enough to notice the cracks. I wondered how many times she'd carried this alone. When I finally stood to leave, dawn was beginning to soften the city's edges. Pale light filtered through the glass, replacing reflections with clarity. She woke as I gathered my things. "You're leaving," she said, not accusing, just observing. "For now," I replied. She stood too, walking me to the door. The distance between us felt louder than ever. "Thank you," she said again. "For respecting the line." I met her eyes. "Thank you for drawing it." We stood there, the office waking around us, the moment thinning as reality returned. Just before I reached for the handle, she spoke. "If things change," she said carefully, "if this becomes harder before it becomes clearer, I need to know something." I turned back. "When it does," she continued, "will you tell me the truth? Even if it means walking away." The question hurt more than I expected. "Yes," I said. "Will you?" She nodded. "I promise." Promises are dangerous when spoken softly. As I stepped into the hallway, the glass door closed between us with a quiet click. I saw her through it, standing still, unreadable, human again only because I knew where to look. I walked away knowing something irreversible had already happened. We hadn't touched. We hadn't confessed. We hadn't crossed a line. But love doesn't always begin with contact. Sometimes, it begins with two people choosing not to leave. and realizing that choice might one day cost them everything. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, between emails, between meetings, between the careful distance we pretended was still intact. Something in the air changed after that night. Not softer. Sharper. Like glass underfoot, waiting for the wrong step. She became more careful. Not colder, never that, but precise in a way that felt intentional. She copied others on emails she used to send directly to me. She ended conversations a second earlier than necessary. At meetings, she addressed the room instead of my eyes. I understood why. That didn't make it easier. Because restraint, once chosen, becomes its own kind of intimacy. And we were running out of places to hide it. The first crack came with a rumor. I heard it in the break room, disguised as laughter. A name mentioned too casually. A pause where there shouldn't have been one. When I walked in, the conversation stopped like a guilty thought. I didn't ask. But I felt it, that familiar tightening in the chest that comes when something precious is being discussed without your consent. By afternoon, HR sent a calendar invite. Mandatory. Confidential. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, knowing, before I ever stepped into that office, that this wasn't about policy. It was about perception. About how easily silence can be mistaken for something else. When I told her, she didn't react right away. She read the invite, then set her phone face down on the desk. Her jaw tightened, the way it always did when she was bracing for impact. This was inevitable, she said calmly. I shook my head. We didn't do anything. That's never stopped anyone before, she replied. Her composure scared me more than anger would have. In the HR office, they spoke in careful phrases. Boundaries. Appearances. Risk. They asked questions that felt like accusations wrapped in politeness. I answered honestly. It didn't seem to matter. When it was over, the damage felt already done. That evening, she called me into her office. The painting was gone. In its place, a blank wall. I noticed it immediately, the absence louder than any object ever could be. I removed it, she said, following my gaze. I didn't want reminders. Of what? I asked quietly. She didn't answer at first. She moved to her desk and opened a folder, documents I recognized instantly. My contract. A transfer request. Already prepared. I can't let this touch you, she said. Or the company. Or my son. My chest tightened. So that's it. She finally looked at me then, and the control she'd been holding cracked, just a little. This isn't fair, she said. I know that. But fairness has never protected anyone I love. I stepped closer, forgetting for a moment all the rules we'd built. You're not protecting me, I said. You're pushing me away. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Because I can survive losing you, she whispered. I can't survive hurting him. There it was. The truth beneath everything. She reached into her drawer and pulled out the letter. The envelope was thinner now, worn like it had been opened and closed 100 times. I reread it last night, she said. Every word. Her voice trembled. I wrote about wanting to be seen. Wanting to rest. Wanting to love without fear. She laughed softly. Naive, isn't it? No, I said. Human. She shook her head. That's the problem. She slid the transfer papers toward me. I'm asking you to leave, she said, voice breaking at last. Not because I don't care. The silence that followed was unbearable. Say it, I asked. She closed her eyes. Because I do. The words landed harder than any goodbye could have. I wanted to argue. To fight. To list all the ways this could work if we were just brave enough. But looking at her, at the weight she carried so quietly, I knew courage wasn't the issue. Fear was. "I won't make this harder for you," I said finally. Her breath shuddered. "Thank you." I picked up the papers, my hand steady despite the storm inside me. At the door, I stopped. "You once asked me not to disappear," I said. "This isn't that." She nodded, tears finally slipping free. "I know." I hesitated, then added, "And this isn't the truth you promised to tell me." She didn't argue. That night, I packed my desk in silence. Each item felt symbolic, a pen she'd borrowed once and never returned. A file folder labeled in her handwriting. A photo I didn't remember taking of the city at dawn. As I left the building, I looked up at her office window. The light was still on. Days passed. Then weeks. My new role kept me busy, distracted, distant. But distance doesn't erase presence, it sharpens it. Every song, every quiet moment, every late night carried echoes of her voice. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. A single message. "I'm sorry. I was wrong to think this would hurt less." I stared at it for a long time. Outside, the city lights flickered on, familiar, relentless. I typed back only 4 words. "Tell me the truth." The reply didn't come right away. When it did, it was short. "Come tomorrow. We need to talk." I exhaled slowly, heart pounding. Some endings don't close doors. They crack them open, just enough to let the truth finally walk through. The next day, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Everything looked normal from the outside, lights flickering, janitors moving silently in the lobby, coffee machines hissing, but I knew better. Behind the glass, she waited, her posture both poised and tense, the kind of tension that only comes from holding back years of fear and longing. She didn't speak when I walked in. She gestured to the seat across from her desk. I sat, careful to maintain the invisible line we'd drawn between us. The silence between us was not uncomfortable this time, it was deliberate. Charged. Waiting. Finally, she leaned forward, elbows resting on the polished wood. "You asked for the truth," she began. Her voice was steady, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her calm. "You stayed when no one expected you to. And now, I need to be honest. With you. With myself." I nodded, barely daring to breathe. "I've spent so long trying to be untouchable," she continued. "Strong. Perfect. Alone. But that night, when you stayed, I realized I was wrong. I've been running from the one thing I need most." Her gaze locked onto mine. Vulnerable, piercing, human. I felt every unspoken word suspended in that moment. "I need someone who sees me," she said softly. "Not the boss. Not the single mother. Not the image everyone expects. Just me." My chest tightened. Her words weren't just confession, they were an invitation. "I want to trust you," she whispered. "To let you in, fully. But I need to know you'll stay, even when it gets messy. Even when life gets in the way. I won't leave," I promised. "Not now. Not ever." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, and for the first time, I saw her not as my boss, not as Miss Carter, but as a woman capable of both breaking and healing hearts. The envelope from her desk, the letters she never sent, sat unopened between us. And yet, the silence between us spoke louder than words ever could. Outside, the city continued its indifferent hum. Inside, 2 lives had changed forever. I realized then that the question she had been too afraid to ask wasn't about courage. It was about love, and whether we were brave enough to answer it together. She reached across the desk, not for my hand, but for the space between us, and for the first time, I understood that love could be spoken in silences, in trust, in staying when leaving seemed easier. And in that quiet office, behind the glass, we began.